Hello, I'm Beth Britton. I support Dementia Community with their communications work. Welcome and thank you for joining us for our second November webinar. Before we get on to the topic for today, I wanted to briefly explain a little more about Dementia Community. Dementia Community is a charitable community benefit society, a membership cooperative that provides learning and networking opportunities for the dementia care community. We are an independent voice and inclusive organisation aiming to help all of our members to feel connected, informed, inspired, empowered, purposeful and engaged in co-produced changes that improve everyone's experiences of dementia, both in care and in wider society. This webinar is just one of the many ways in which we do this. Community members own a £1 community share in Dementia Community, and membership is open to everyone. So if you aren't already a member, do join us. You can use the QR code on your screen or the link that will be going into the chat to visit our membership page. If you're having any difficulties in joining Dementia Community, please do message myself or my colleague Barbara, who is also on the call today, and we will try to help. We now have a new free issue of the Journal of Dementia Care. So this is our latest fantastic offering for you. So it's new, it's free, and it is a special issue, as you can see, all focused on technology. It's digital only, this one, so it is very much in keeping with the tech theme. Please use the QR code that you can see on the front cover there. Or the link in the chat to read this issue. It is absolutely not to be missed. I think a whopping 54 pages of brilliant content for you to get your teeth into. We also have a couple of other free special issues that we've launched at previous UK Dementia Congresses. Congress obviously has just passed now, but two further free issues, one on the arts and one on equality, diversity and inclusion. Again, please use the QR codes on the front covers of those issues to have a read of those. We do also have printed copies of these issues. So do look out in the chat both for the link if you would like to read it online, and also the email address if you would like to email us to request your own hard copy issue of the arts or EDI special issues of the journal. Please note that aside from the arts and EDI issues of the Journal of Dementia Care is a digital only publication. Right, let's get into the main business of today. So today's webinar, our topic is what are the books, where are the books for people living with dementia? I will introduce you to our speakers shortly, but just some very brief housekeeping. As you will already have been alerted to by Zoom, we are recording this webinar. Please use the chat for your questions. We will have a Q&A and discussion after the presentation, and we will be keeping an eye on the chat. And afterwards, the recording of this webinar will go onto our YouTube channel, Dementia Community. So let's get started, and let me introduce you to our fantastic speakers for today. So we have Sarah Lawrance, who is lead for dementia-friendly reading and publishing at Equal Arts, and Gill Taylor, who is an expert by experience and keen reader, which I think sounds like a fantastic title. Gill, I think we should all be keen readers. Welcome to you both. Thank you so much for joining us. Really looking forward to hearing from you, and over to you.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you for hosting us today. I hope everybody can hear me all right. You'll have to contact Rod in the chat if you can't for any reason. I'm going to talk today with Gill about the work that Equal Arts has been doing to develop a new publishing imprint for people with early to moderate dementia. Gill's going to also talk a bit about her own experience of reading and how that's changed since her diagnosis. Equal Arts is a creative ageing charity based in Newcastle. So a lot of our work is in the Northeast, but the books are a new national initiative, which we hope everybody will enjoy. You might want in the chat, if you want to, you might want to put something up about where you're dialing in from, and you might also like to say what reading means to you. because it's always nice to share that kind of thing. And some of you might want to say whether your dementia has affected your reading and how, or you might just want to say hello. That's absolutely fine. But feel free to chat away in the chat about those things. Okay. I'm going to introduce you to our books in a minute, but first of all, Gill, can you tell us a little bit about what reading means to you and how your reading has changed since you developed dementia and how it's continuing to change?
Reading for me is a lifeline. I've always read. I've always read books, newspapers, online, anything and everything. And I've always enjoyed reading, and it has changed. It's changed in how I remember things. It's changed how I understand sentences. So sometimes I can't remember what I've been reading seconds after I've read it, minutes, an hour. So I have to reread, and also it'll. There are some words that I know what the words are, but sometimes I can't remember what they mean, which is really frustrating. But yeah, reading has changed with dementia now. It's not as easy as it used to be. It's not as comfortable. Font is wrong. Font is very uncomfortable for me. Things that you wouldn't expect that would change for dementia. You know, it's not just about not remembering. It's also about how you understand things, how you structure a sentence. If sometimes the sentences don't appear to be structured in the way that I can understand them because of how they're written, whether they've got commas, whether they've got exclamation marks. It's very, very complex now. But I still read, and sometimes I really have to focus very, very hard on what I'm reading, especially when I'm reading the news. I mean, that's important. I like to keep up with the news, but the way they write the news is often very short, but it doesn't suit how I read. I think I read visually in my mind. So what I'm reading, I am seeing. And if it doesn't describe something, it doesn't interest me. You know, I mean, I can read dialogue, and dialogue is really important. But again, it still has to be clear. Never used to be. I mean, I used to be able to read anything, everything. I used to like to challenge what genre I would read. And I used to enjoy reading a lot of non-fiction because I just find reading books, you're constantly learning. But that for me is something that I can no longer do. I can only read in short pages. I can pick up a non-fiction book, and if it's something I'm interested in, I'll just go to a bit of the chapter and I'll look at the chapter and I'll think, right, is that the bit I want to read? And I'll just sift through the lines and the paragraphs just to see that bit that I really want, I'm interested in, which is, of course, not how you read a book at all. But it doesn't stop me reading. None of it stops me reading. I just sort of continue.
That's brilliant, Gill. Thank you very much for that. And it's good to see so many contributions coming through in the chat as well. I don't think you'll have been able to spot them, Gill, as they were coming on screen while you were talking, but a lot of people saying that they're also keen readers and want to learn about ways in which they can continue to read or support people to continue reading. So so everybody's in the right place this afternoon for a conversation about reading with dementia. And what Gill has described, really, obviously, we know that everybody with a dementia has a different set of symptoms. So some people will have a lot of the same things that Gill struggles with, but then other people might have different things as well. And so there isn't a kind of complete one size fits all, clearly. And that we're not trying to say that there is. But there are some commonalities which I guess we're trying to address. Is there anything else you wanted to add on that point, Gill?
Yes, I mean, too many characters in a book. That really confuses me. I can't remember who they are. And I often, sometimes what I do is I'll write myself a small synopsis of who they are. On a piece of paper so that I can remember who they are and just look at them and say, oh yeah, that's who they are. So it just makes it a bit easier. But I still get excitement from it.
Well, that's great because really the other thing we want to say is, yes, that there are lots and lots of challenges for somebody with dementia continuing to read. In a way, it's a bit like presenting somebody with a sort of mental obstacle course when you put a book in front of, a conventional book in front of somebody. But there are still loads and loads of benefits. So it's still really worth trying to read. We know that continuing to read helps to keep your brain active, which is so important when you, it's important for all of us, not just having people with dementia, but for everybody. It stimulates your imagination. So giving you new things to think about, new things to talk about as well. And it can create a social connection because you're sharing thoughts and ideas with other people through the medium of words. And it can be a springboard for other activity as well, because it can give you, you can find out more about something and then want to explore that further. So there's lots and lots of ways in which reading is really beneficial, and therefore it's worth trying to find ways to support the people to continue to read and read for enjoyment and empower. It's about empowering people, really. So we're just going to move on. I'm going to introduce. So I mentioned that Equal Arts is a creative aging charity. So we've been going for about 40 years, based in the Northeast, but also working further afield some of the time. So the majority of our work is we have a pool of freelance artists, musicians, and dance practitioners that run creative workshops in community centres and cultural venues and libraries around the region, and as I said, further afield. Moving into reading and publishing has been quite a new development for us that's come up over the last couple of years. And the first book that we produced, Bewick Tales, that really grew out of a project that we were running that explored the life and work of an illustrator, an engraver called Thomas Bewick, who lived in Newcastle in the 19th century and was he was a great innovator in engraving, and also made a huge contribution to natural history. His books of natural history became immensely popular at that time. Our groups involved in the project were exploring Bewick's work by actually spending time with the collections of his work at Newcastle City Library and in some other venues around Newcastle. And this meant that they were getting their hands on original prints and books and diaries and all kinds of interesting material. As they were doing this, and I was working with them, it became obvious that people were fascinated by the material and by the stories that they discovered in the collection. And I began to wonder whether there was a way in which we should capture some of these stories and share them with a wider audience, and particularly with some of our participants who live with dementia, because some of them might be find it less easy to come into the museums and libraries, or just might need more encouragement to do so and to engage with the material. So that's where the idea for the Bewick Tales book came from, because it might not seem like the most obvious way to start a dementia-friendly publishing imprint with a story about a 19th century engraver. In reality, there's a lot about Bewick that lends itself to this interpretation, because the illustrations are fascinating and full of humour, and the non-fiction nature of the narrative that we were able to create lends itself to sort of reading in small chunks, which is a bit more accessible than a book of fiction. The Dorothy Wordsworth book is the more recent book that we've produced, and that is about, well, as it says, Dorothy Wordsworth. She was the sister of William Wordsworth, the famous poet. And again, this was partly inspired by a piece of project work that our groups were doing in collaboration with the Wordsworth Trust. And again, it was stories that grew out of working with their collections. But there's another reason for working, for why Dorothy, why her story is so pertinent. She kept diaries during a lot of her life, but particularly in the early years when she and William lived at Grasmere. And there are wonderful, vivid passages, very often quite short entries, but very much in the moment descriptions of the landscapes, the people, and the weather where they lived in the Lake District, which is very vivid, very relatable. Gill mentioned earlier about the importance of vivid, relatable descriptions, and that's what you get in Dorothy's diaries. Dorothy herself actually seemed to develop a form of dementia in her latter years, which wasn't diagnosed as such in those days, but it was another reason why she was an interesting character for us to work with. So what makes the books dementia friendly? Now, I've already said that people with dementia have a mixture of symptoms, as we know. So it's not, none of this is an exact science. None of it's completely guaranteed to work for everybody. That's not the point. But we spent a lot of time in the development of both books, consulting with people living with dementia. Gill was one of those people who made some really valuable contributions and pushed us on various things. So what we've arrived at is absolutely the result of close observation and consultation. So the first thing to think about, and these apply also to other reading materials that you might look for if you're trying to support somebody. So think about the size and shape of a book. Is it easy to hold? If it's big and heavy, then that's not a great start. The landscape format, so a book that's wider than it is tall, is better sharing because you can sit side by side with somebody more easily. That's good because sometimes the reader might be perfectly fine to read entirely on their own, but other days they might prefer to share with somebody. So it's good to be able to do both. A book that's hardback and opens flat is better than a paperback because it means you can lay it down and the pages are not going to spring closed. It means you can focus in the moment on what you're looking at. The landscape format also makes it easier to turn the pages with just one hand, which is good for people perhaps who have reduced manual dexterity. We've also thought about the textures. That's important. You've got contrasting textures between the smooth cover and the matte surface of the paper on the internal pages. And we've got a ribbon marker, which means that you can mark where you're up to if you want to, but it's also just nice, something nice to touch and feel. Altogether, it's meant to be something that looks and feels nice. It's a positive sensory experience, something that if you give it to somebody, it feels special rather than just a kind of ordinary book. I suppose you want it to feel special, for somebody to feel loved, I suppose. We thought very hard about the page layout and the design. On each spread, we thought about how to organize the content. We have a very good graphic designer who works with us on this. And the whole goal is about reducing the cognitive load associated with reading. So you have navigational aids, like there are page numbers on each page and a header at the top of the page, so that if you forget what book you're looking at, the title is up there. You've got the text in little chunks, and the font varies in size from the top heading to the sort of first paragraph to the body text. And that enables people to pick bits out. It also highlights, I suppose, the bits that are most important to the story, and somebody might just read those bits and then their partner could read the other bits. The font sizes are bigger than in a lot of ordinary books, and there's extra space around the lines, all of which is meant to make it easier for somebody to read. And we also don't do any hyphenation of words because that's really not very legible. the content, yeah, I've mentioned already where this sort of idea of working with historical heritage content has come from, and that really is rooted in the other sort of participatory arts practice of equal arts. Each book has a simple overarching narrative. In these two books, it's essentially a biographical narrative, so the story of somebody's life. But on each page, you've got a mini story. So it's either a page or a double spread, a mini story. And that has the effect of creating a kind of satisfying reading experience on that page, so that you can dip in or dip out and you can still feel as though you've read something interesting and worthwhile. The content on the pages is quite a mixture of things, and that's designed to support curiosity and motivation to read. If reading's difficult for you, it needs to be worthwhile. Otherwise, why would you make the effort? So there needs to be stuff that will kind of pique your interest. On the 2 pages, that picture's not very big, so you can't really see, but the left-hand page, the little mini story is all about the letters that Dorothy and William wrote almost daily, and the fact that Dorothy frequently walked between their home and the post office 3 miles away, sometimes by night, to post the letters at all times of year. And the picture is the Wordsworth's post bag. It's a tapestry post bag from the museum in Grasmere with a couple of little letters on the top of it. And on the right-hand page, the little mini story is called Pen and Ink, and it's about, there's a picture of a quill pen that belonged to the Wordsworth family, and a little recipe for making ink, which is transcribed from a book, a manuscript book that again belonged to the Wordsworths, so may have been the actual ink recipe that they used. So it's a mixture of content, little things that might give you something new to read. We also include open-ended questions on a lot of the pages, and those are designed to start a conversation. They're not quiz questions where there's a right answer or a wrong answer. It's really about opening up discussion and conversation. And the themes, although the content might seem like it's very, very specific, the themes in each book are very relatable, and they're designed to be a kind of launch pad for exploration and discovery. Just like Gill just was talking about going to find out one particular bit of information because she wanted to go somewhere else with it. It's that approach. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a little while. So now then, Gill, I think you wanted to talk about this page and another page, because these were some of the ones that you particularly...
Yeah, I liked, this is one of my favourite pages from the Dorothy Wordsworth book. I mean, combined with the photograph, I have actually been to Dove Cottage, so that brings it alive for me, the fact that I've been there. Although it was some years ago, it was a fascination for me, because I love poetry, because I find poetry is like small pieces of small stories. Currently reading Robert Frost at the moment, but so yes, and I wanted to see where William Wordsworth lived. This room here, you can imagine Dorothy sitting here. You can imagine the birds flying up under the eaves, and she's watching them. And I love the description how that she was so distressed when the nest fell, the collapse of the nest. And she sort of must have eagerly waited for them to sort of build that nest again. And I just found that really it was really personal about her as a person, not just about her supporting William, but her with her own internal compassion and her thoughts. And it's just, she would sit there quietly watching this and taking in the nature. It just, this page here just absolutely sort of brought me closer to Dorothy. That's, yeah, definitely.
That's lovely, Jill. Thank you for that. There was another one that you asked for, this one in Bewick.
Yes. I actually, I think it's probably like the same thing. It's like all these tools, it's tangible. This page is tangible. Any person looking at this page, and especially males who don't always read, who read less than females, but you can imagine a male reading these can almost pick up and think about the tools that they inherited from their father, the tools that they've touched. You can almost touch these tools. But not only that, it was just interesting to see what they were called and how they would be used. And the fact that each of these tools were made, that Thomas Bewick made these tools. And there's so much in this page that you wouldn't think of. And I think this is a page for both males and females, which I actually find is really important to engage some males into reading when they've got dementia, because they often find difficult knowing what to do or what interests. A book will be offered to a female, but not always to a male, because it would seem that it's not appropriate. This is appropriate. This book is appropriate, especially for me, looking at this page. I just found so much in it. It just leaps out at me. It's personal. It leaps out at me. And you can almost touch these.
Thank you, Jill. It's really interesting to hear you mention the names of the tools as well, because they are weird names. Spit sticker, tint tool, and scorper. These are names that nobody would know really, unless they happen to be an engraver. But it's a bit like poetry on the tongue, isn't it? It's they're fun. They're fun to learn. The names. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So I'm going too far. Here we are. Right. So for the next bit of the session, I'm just going to talk a little bit about how we've been running shared reading groups at Equal Arts. And hopefully some of what I'll say will be useful to those of you who are perhaps supporting other people or interested in trying to do so. We are currently running a programme called Reading with Dementia that's a collaboration with Newcastle Libraries. So this is, this is very live work. So the first thing really is to think about creating a safe space where the reading can happen, where you're free of interruptions, where you're not, because you don't want to be distracted. That sounds obvious, but it's not always easy to do, especially in a care setting, for example, where there tend to be people coming in and out a lot. It's best to be seated at a table if you're working with a group of people to do a reading session, rather than in comfortable chairs. I know that might sound a little bit counterintuitive because we're used to the idea of snuggling up with a book. But if you want to create a sense of intention, it works better in a lot of ways if you're sitting up and can get started. The obvious things, having hearing aids and reading glasses organised, but of course those, it's easy to forget sometimes, and cup of tea, or maybe at the beginning, maybe partway through. If you're preparing to run a reading session with somebody, it's worth thinking about how you're going to shape that experience. Think about what theme the reading might have, how you'll introduce that, and what materials you might use. And you might have something at the beginning that's a bit light-hearted, move into something a little bit more reflective, and perhaps mix it up again with something else afterwards. So it's worth just thinking about how you'll shape your session. Take turns to read aloud and to listen. Reading and listening are part of the experience. It's a lot of people maybe aren't that confident about reading aloud. It might, they might have bad memories of reading aloud at school. But actually, as long as it feels safe and supportive and there's no judgment or anything like that, then it's quite surprising as you work with people that they can find their voice and feel more confident with reading aloud. And can be a really affirming experience to be able to do that and to then be appreciated by other people in the group. So the listening and the reading aloud go together. It's important. I do find that sometimes people who perhaps are starting to lose their words can sometimes actually the written text on the page can actually act as a bit of a scaffold and can actually help people then to rediscover their voice. So they might be quite quiet in a group discussion, but then still be able to read aloud, which is, interesting. You might want to bring in sounds and other sensory effects to help enhance the reading. This can, if you choose them right, this can really help with the experience. It can make it more of a sensory sort of 360 experience. You need to make sure you don't overload it so that it becomes distracting. But for example, if you've got a picture, so like the picture of the swallows at the window, if you were reading that with somebody, you could perhaps find on YouTube or some Spotify or something, you could find something with the swallow song on it and listen to the sound of swallows. And that might be a nice thing to do. Open-ended questions. I mentioned this earlier as something we put into our books. That's a really good way of starting a conversation about what you're reading. And they can be quite off the wall. It doesn't have to be, it's not about comprehension. It is, it's an opportunity to really use your imagination. Poems, songs, other content that might relate to a theme. If you're listening to a song, it's helpful to have the song lyrics in front of you so that people can look at those at the same time as hearing things. Poems are, a lot of us are maybe a bit nervous about poetry. People might not have felt confident with it at school. But actually, if you start to think about it less as a sort of literature exercise and more as a kind of playing with words, then that opens that up. And in the same way that a lot of people with dementia might be mixing up words and trying different things, in a way that's poetry too, because it's putting things together in different ways. I'd always say try and think about how you'll end the session as well, so that it feels nice and satisfying when you come to an end, rather than just saying, oh, I've done half an hour, now it's time to go. It's good to think about how you make it into a rounded experience. Okay, so I've got a page here on the screen, which I'm going to invite Gill to read. Gill, could you read the bit on the white pages? And Beth, could you read the bit on the blue? So, Gill, is that all right?
Yes.
And while Beth and Gill are reading, if everybody could just sort of imagine for a moment that you're in that picture. Imagine you're standing in the orchard, looking up at the house, and think about what's around you, what you can hear, smell, what you can feel under your feet. Okay, Gill, off you go.
Cherryburn. Here in this low stone-built house with its thatched roof and smoking chimney, Thomas Bewick was born in August 1753. The house is a tiny place called Cherryburn, near the village of Mickley in Northumberland. Cherryburn is a short distance from the River Tyne, surrounded by trees and fields. The little square window in the gable end was Thomas's bedroom. Here he lay awake, listening to the wind and weather, to the rushing water in the river, and to birdsong in spring.
Thank you.
In his memoir, Thomas Bewick wrote, "From the little window at my bedhead, I noticed all the varying seasons of the year, and when the spring put in, I felt charmed with the music of birds which strained their little throats to proclaim it." And in the picture, we see Cherryburn, the birthplace of Thomas Bewick, and it was drawn and engraved by his brother, John.
Thank you both. I don't know whether anybody wants to put anything in the chat about what pictures came into your head, what you thought you could hear if you were there, what you thought you could smell if you were standing there. If there's anything that's coming into your mind, you might want to share it. Or not.
While people are doing that, Sarah, I would say that having shown us that beautiful room of Dorothy's, I kind of was back there. I was mixing up the two. I was imagining almost that I could be there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so smelling wood smoke, birds, hearing bird song and the roar of the river, feeling peaceful summer smells and bird sounds, sights of apples forming on the trees and bird song with sun on my face. Birds and what stories they might have with their unique views. That's a really interesting one as well. Yeah, great. Okay, so I'm just going to move the slide on now. We take you back to Dove Cottage briefly. And I'd like to invite you all just to spend a couple of minutes reading this by yourselves and suggest an open-ended question you could use to start a conversation if you were reading this page with somebody. So just take a couple of minutes to have a look and then think of an open-ended question that might spring to mind. If anybody wants to put their question in the chat to share with other people, that'd be lovely.
I have to say, Sarah, from reading the description, I mean, A, she brings it to life so beautifully. But my question, I think, would be, I wonder if spring was it her favourite season? Do we think it was her favourite season? Because she's describing it in such glowing terms. And yeah,
I don't know
what...
that. I don't know which was her favourite season. She does vivid descriptions at all times of year, but I agree with you that this is absolutely beautiful and so evocative. Yes, what colours are you seeing?
I wonder if more evocative because actually you're coming out of the darkness of the winter and it's that feeling of new life. And
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yes.
question from Belinda. What does springtime remind you of?
That's a good one. Could be what reminds you of how might they smell? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think I would ask, how does it make you feel reading her description?
Yeah.
Makes me smile, Jill. I couldn't help smiling.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Makes me feel alive because it's spring. You feel alive in spring, don't you? Just
Or from my colleague Barbara, what might the women at their doors be talking about?
That's a good one.
It's good.
gossip.
Yes. That could open up all sorts of conversations. Yes. Yeah.
And I think Caroline's, what might those flowers smell like? And I guess if you were doing this as a shared reading exercise in spring, based on what you said earlier, you could have some spring flowers.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely you could. Yeah. Yeah. And you could listen to bird sounds and yeah, but you can take it off in other directions as well, and you can think about journal writing, and you could think about nature observation. You could do drawing, painting. There's different things that you could springboard from. It's not necessarily that you need to enter the world of Dorothy Wordsworth and be strictly confined to that. You can go in other directions. And I think she actually encourages you to do that in her writing.
I like Kate's question. I wonder what memories come to mind when you hear Dorothy's description, which, as Kate says, would invite story sharing, it would invite live story work, it would invite lots of tales of springtime and life and nature.
Yes, Debbie's asked the question about the throstle. I don't know the answer to that one. I think it might be a Northumbrian name. That's why I put the name thrush in square brackets, because I didn't want to lose the word throstle because it's a very characterful name. But yeah, obviously it's not one that we're familiar with now. Okay. I'm conscious of time and needing to allow people time to ask questions. So I'm just putting this up there so that you can see where you can get the books. And they are available direct from Equal Arts, but also from all the other usual places you might buy your books from. And wait a minute, there we go. Oh, hang on. If you would like to find out any more about the books or about the work we're doing, there's a QR code which will take you to that section on our website. But that's it for now, except for questions, if anybody has got any.
I'm going to pop the link in the chat to Equal Arts as well. So that's
Okay.
there. And say first and foremost, Sarah and Gill, thank you so much. It's been very insightful. There's one thing I absolutely want to go and do now, and I want to go and buy your books, which was absolutely not necessarily our intention with today, but Christmas is on its way. It's not a bad Christmas present. Whether you're living with
good Christmas present. Yeah.
whether you're living with dementia or not, I think they are just incredibly interesting. While people are thinking, do you have any more books in the pipeline, Sarah? Have you got more planned?
We've got a few things. We've got some things lining up in the same sort of series, but I can't really say just yet because we're still kind of cooking things up. But yes, the intention is to continue. What we'd really like to be able to do is create a whole library of books for people, so that you're not just stuck with 2 books. There needs to be a whole bookshelf of them, really. So yeah.
That would be absolutely super. And as Gill was saying, books that have a broad appeal, men, women, different interests, and all of that, I think would be fantastic. Right, our lovely audience have got some questions for us because they don't want me carrying on and on and on. So, Kate saying, I wonder what your thoughts are about writing books through lived experience.
Well, by that, do you mean bringing in life stories or people involving people with dementia in the writing? I'm not quite sure what the question is. Perhaps you could just clarify.
Okay, give us a little bit more clarification. We do have a further question from Kate. She says, I wonder what your thoughts are about the libraries using dementia-friendly on titles. Could you suggest an alternative?
That's a very pertinent question. I can perhaps say that the red stickers on our books are designed to be removable, so that if there are people who are not so comfortable with their diagnosis, then that can you don't need to the label can come off. Although I should warn you that the stickers on the Bewick books are a little bit harder to remove. I believe a hairdryer might warm up the glue a bit, but anyway, we improved that on the Dorothy ones. The dementia friendly, we've twisted on this one, because we know that it's challenging for some people, but on the other hand, how will you find the books if they're not labeled? And that's the issue. And also, we're really trying to tackle the sense of stigma that still persists around dementia. So we feel it's, we're trying to say it's not all bad. No, there are some, it's still possible to live well. Do you want to add to that one, Gill?
Yeah, we had this discussion. I think there's a few people have had this discussion. Do you use the word just accessible instead of dementia friendly? But then dementia's not it's not a bad word. It's just a descriptive word. And I think the more you use it, the more acceptable it becomes. Because there is this fear as an absolute fear of dementia, and I think especially for people who fear they're going to get dementia, not really understanding what it is. And I think that has led to people not wanting to have that diagnosis. So they don't like the word, oh, well, you've got dementia. They'll deny it because there's always been this thing about how dementia is just such a hidden thing in families. You don't talk about the person who's got dementia. Let's just, sort of move them aside. But the more you talk about it, the more, I can't think of the word I'm thinking of, the more, anybody come up with a word?
It's more mainstream. We want people to talk about it, don't we, Joe? It needs to be
exactly.
It's part of normal life, and you are proof that you can live with dementia and you can read and you can do stuff. I think we have this perception that we fast forward to end of life, don't they? That's where you get diagnosis, and there's nothing really in between. And you're very much the embodiment that there is.
Exactly. That's it. It's you think that when you get dementia, you think there's a beginning and there's an end and there's nothing else in between. I mean, when people tell you, oh, you're going to get dementia, you think, oh, that's the end. It isn't. And so when people talk to me, I always say I have got dementia. And so therefore, I'm not afraid to talk about it. And I think this is it. It reduces the fear. And so to have that dementia-friendly sticker on there, actually is just part of making it normal. Just one of those things, let's find something that is dementia-friendly. So I think we have to stick with that. I really do. I don't think we should shy away from using the word dementia.
And it sounds like it's been a collaborative process between Equal Arts and obviously you guys as their advisors in all of this.
Exactly.
That you discuss this and collaborate.
Yes, returning to that collaboration and co-production. I mean, Equal Arts has been working with people living with dementia for 40 years in this kind of, in a creative and kind of free flowing way. So it's a very live relationship that we have with our readers and our participants. So that feeds directly into what we do.
Right, we're massively running out of time, but I am mindful we've got a few questions in the chat and I don't want to cut us off before we've actually had a chance to just very briefly answer some of these. So Kate has qualified her first question around writing books through lived experience, and she's saying lived experience, collaboration and co-creation, which sounds like that's what you're kind of doing at the moment. That's what I'm getting.
That's what I was trying to respond to. Yes.
So Caroline, any recommendations to someone who illustrates, how to make your images, your illustrations accessible?
I don't have any specific I'm sure I could think of things. I'd be happy to have that conversation with you, Caroline, offline if you want. I mean, it'd be interesting. I'd be interested to hear what you're doing. So let's
Sarah.
separate chat, because that feels like a kind of I'd be interested.
Thank you. Belinda says it would be good to have a resource guide for people who want to facilitate shared reading groups. We're
working on one at the moment as part of our Reading with Dementia program, so there will be something. It's not, and it sounds like, I think there's a post up there, somebody said Northern Ireland. Hang on, that somebody
we've got that. Yeah, so someone, Jane, saying I am facilitating shared reading for people with dementia in Ireland. We have a website. We'll be sharing resources soon. She's popped a link in there and also her email address as well.
Yeah, that's great.
So let me just squeeze down a little bit. Debbie says, could there be a review of other existing books that could be classed as dementia friendly and add the sticker to, particularly in libraries?
Well, There really isn't very much. That's the whole issue. There's very, very little. There are the Reading Agency, which is a national charity, publishes a list called Reading Well for Dementia, but virtually, I mean, I think all the books on there are books about dementia, about supporting people with dementia. They're about symptoms and understanding the condition. They're not for people with dementia to read for enjoyment. So this is a new genre, if you like. We've had conversations with the Reading Agency about trying to get our books onto that list, but it was too late. They take so long producing their lists that we missed the boat. There is another publisher called Cognitive Books, which was set up with support from the Alzheimer's Society. They've produced 3 books quite recently. Some of the same principles apply to those. They're very different in style from our books, but they are, again, it's about supporting people to read for enjoyment. But there genuinely is not a great deal of specifically dementia-friendly stuff out there.
That's why you feel such an important gap in the market. And I do a lot of work with LD, and I would also put a shout out there for Books Beyond Words, because they're great. If words really are a problem, if people with learning disabilities or really extensive communication difficulties, actually they can be really helpful, because you make up your own story from the pictures. Let's just see if we've got anything else. Alison, 100%. The fact that people aren't told what type of dementia they have sometimes is part of the problem. She works with schools. That's a really good comment. Thank you, Alison. And then a final one, I think, from Kate. I wonder if when more publications are available that are accessible for people living with dementia, more neurodivergent and facing other cognitive challenges will also be supported and feel more valued. I think you just add to this space, don't you, Sarah? I mean, you know, we need a lot more for people who do find traditional books difficult.
We do need
I
more.
think these books, sorry,
You say,
I was going to say, I think these books are accessible for neurodivergent as well, to be quite honest with you.
We'd love to see more, wouldn't we, Jill? We'd love to see more.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love them. I've actually read them quite a few times, you know.
Go back to my earlier comment. I'm really desperate to get them now. I should have bought them from you at Congress, Sarah. But yeah, I want to go and put myself in Dorothy's room again, watching those birds making their nest. We've run out of time, ladies. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Jill. It's been amazing to hear from you both, and an absolute shout out for some fantastic books from Equal Arts. Do go and grab yourselves a copy. So without further ado, we are almost at the end of 2025. We have 2 webinars left this year. Both of them are in December, no surprise, because we're nearly at the end of November. So we have one on delirium on the 8th of December and one on young onset dementia on the 15th of December. Very much hoping you can join us for those. There are links there. You can find our webinars. Also follow our Eventbrite page, because that's where you will get that notification that pings into your inbox that says Dementia Community have set up another webinar. And do keep an eye out for our winter program going into next year and eventually into the spring, ladies, the spring. I cannot wait. But thank you so much for joining us today. We've really enjoyed having your company. Thank you again to our speakers. And we look forward to seeing you on a Dementia Community webinar again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.